Hello everyone, welcome to Frightful Whispers. I'm here to guide you into the shadows tonight. I know you're using this video to unwind and drift off to sleep. So, before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, get cozy, relax, and let the whispers of the night take over. I thought this apartment would be my fresh start. A new city, a new life, a place where I could finally leave my past behind. I had moved here with nothing but hope in my suitcase. Hope that this would be the place where I could breathe again, where I could escape the weight of everything that had crushed me for so long. But when I stepped into the building for the first time, there was something off. The old stone staircase creaked under my feet as I climbed, and the hallways, narrow and dimly lit, smelled faintly of mildew. There was a kind of heaviness in the air that I couldn't shake, as though the walls were holding something in, something that had been there long before I arrived. Maybe it was just the building's age, the peeling wallpaper, the worn-out carpet, but there was an unsettling stillness that clung to the place, like it had been waiting for me. When I finally reached my apartment, I stood there for a moment staring at the door. It was slightly ajar, just enough to give a glimpse of the dim light spilling out. I thought it was a sign that it was meant to be, but as I stepped inside, the room felt colder than it should have. The air was stale, heavy, as if the apartment had been abandoned for years. I dropped my suitcase by the door and looked around. The walls were bare. There was nothing here, nothing to remind me of the past. Just 4 empty walls and the promise of a new beginning. I tried to tell myself that this place was a blank canvas, ready for me to paint a new life, but the silence was suffocating. It pressed down on me, making every little sound feel too loud. I walked into the small living room, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The light flickered above, casting long shadows across the walls. As I moved, my gaze fell to the far corner. A small crack in the plaster caught my eye. It was barely noticeable, a thin line running from the floor to the ceiling, but something about it made my skin crawl. I stepped closer, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. There was something unnatural about it, something wrong. It was as though the crack wasn't just a flaw in the wall. It was a wound, a scar left behind by something that didn't belong. I shook my head, trying to push the thought out of my mind. It was just an old building, I told myself. Old buildings had cracks, imperfections. I wasn't going to let it bother me. I had to focus on making this place my own, on moving forward. But as I walked away from the crack, the feeling didn't fade. It lingered, clinging to me like a shadow. Something was watching me. I moved into the bedroom, hoping the change of scenery would calm my nerves. But when I reached the bed, I froze. A chill washed over me. The air felt heavier now, thick with something I couldn't quite place. I looked around the room, and that's when I saw it. The eyes. They were there, peering at me from the wall, the same wall where the crack had been. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, there they were. 2 glowing, yellow eyes staring back at me from the darkness of the plaster. The pupils were black voids, dark and endless, and they didn't blink, they just watched me. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. My heart was pounding in my chest, my legs trembling as I tried to move. But I couldn't take my eyes off of them. The eyes grew bigger, almost impossibly large, filling the space where the crack had been. The air around me thickened, pressing down like a heavy weight. And then I heard it, a whisper. It was soft at first, a barely audible sound, like the rustling of paper. But then it grew louder, clearer, until it was right beside me. I see you. I spun around, my body frozen with terror, but there was nothing behind me. Nothing at all. The room was empty. The eyes were gone. I ran. I don't even remember how. My feet moved on their own, carrying me to the door, and I flung it open, gasping for air. I needed to get out. I needed to escape. But where could I go? This place, it was alive. The walls, the air, the silence, it was all waiting for me. I found myself in the hallway, my hands shaking as I leaned against the wall. The sounds in the building, the creaks and groans, felt too loud, too close. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to stop the sob that threatened to break free. I had to get out, I had to leave, but something held me here. Something that I couldn't explain. Something that pulled me back into the apartment with invisible chains. I had to talk to someone. Anyone. I wasn't going crazy, was I? I wasn't imagining things. I had seen the eyes, and they had seen me. I made my way to Mrs. Roth's apartment next door. She was kind, a bit too kind, but in a way that made you feel like she was holding a secret. When I knocked, she answered almost immediately, her eyes narrowing when she saw my distress. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come out right. All I could do was stammer, talking about the eyes, the whispering, and how it felt like something was inside the walls, watching me. Her face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might faint. "You saw it," she whispered almost to herself. "The creature. It's been here for years." Her words didn't make sense, not at first. The creature? What was she talking about? But before I could ask, the door opened behind her, and there he was. Dr. McKinney, the therapist. He smiled at me, but there was something wrong with his smile. It wasn't kind, it was calculating, like he was looking through me, not at me. His eyes lingered on me just a little too long, as if he knew something I didn't. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust anyone anymore. But Mrs. Roth urged me to speak with him, to let him help. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't the only one who felt watched. I wasn't the only one who knew there was something in this building. Something lurking, waiting for its next victim. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe it was because I had nowhere else to go, or maybe it was because deep down, I knew the creature wasn't just in the walls. It was inside me too. And I couldn't run from it forever. I wish I had. I had moved in, hoping for peace, thinking this small apartment would be my refuge. A fresh start. But as soon as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The silence was thick, heavy, like it was pressing against me. Maybe it was just the weight of everything I'd left behind. Or maybe it was the old building settling, creaking under its own age. But even though the apartment was small, empty, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for me. Waiting for me to make a mistake. The cracks in the walls seemed to watch me, the uneven lines in the plaster catching my eye every time I moved. I tried to ignore them. I had to. This was supposed to be a new chapter. But the stillness lingered, creeping into my mind as I unpacked. I moved things around, trying to get comfortable. A few pieces of furniture, a single photograph on the mantel. It was the kind of place you'd expect to feel at home in after a while. But it never happened. The silence stayed. Night fell fast. It always does. The fading sunlight couldn't warm the apartment anymore. I tried to sleep, but the bed felt like stone beneath me. Every movement too loud in the quiet. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound, but even that felt alien, like it didn't belong here. I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to drown out the noise of my thoughts. I hadn't even realized how long I'd been awake until I started hearing things. At first, it was just a soft creak, distant and echoing through the apartment. I thought it was the building. Old houses make noises. But then there was another creak, and another. Closer now. My heart started to race, pounding in my ears. It couldn't be anything. Just the wind or the house shifting, right? But then I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. I froze. My blood ran cold. My chest tightened, suffocating. I wanted to scream, but my voice was stuck in my throat. I strained my ears, listening in the dark, trying to make sense of it. Was I just imagining things? Was it just my nerves getting to me after moving into this strange place? The whisper came again, this time clearer. "I see you." I shot upright in bed, my heart hammering, my hands shaking as I reached for the light. There was nothing. No one. The room was empty, but the air felt heavy, like it was thick with something. Something that wasn't there before. I could still hear it, that whisper, scratching at the back of my skull. I backed away from the wall, the words repeating in my mind. It wasn't just the sound of the whisper, it felt like it was inside my head, curling around my thoughts. "I see you." I shook my head, telling myself it was just my imagination, that the stress had gotten to me. I tried to lie back down, to close my eyes and make it go away, but it wouldn't. The whisper didn't stop. It only grew louder, darker, as if it was pressing against my mind. I'm waiting. I felt my stomach twist, my muscles locked in place, as if I was rooted to the bed, unable to move. I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe. My thoughts became a tangled mess, fear clawing at every corner of my mind. It felt like the room was closing in on me, like the walls themselves were alive, shifting, groaning under the weight of something unseen, something that was coming closer. And then I saw it. It started with a small crack in the wall by the bed. I hadn't noticed it before, but now it seemed different. The light from the window barely touched the corner, but the crack, it grew. Slowly, impossibly, it stretched wider. I didn't know if I was seeing things or if it was really happening. It felt so real. The crack widened more, jagged edges splitting further apart, as though something was inside, pushing against the plaster, desperate to get out. I wanted to look away, I tried to, but my eyes wouldn't leave it. The crack was getting bigger, more pronounced, and then, there they were, the eyes. At first, I thought I was losing my mind, but I wasn't. They were real. I could see them, two glowing yellow eyes peering out from the wall. The pupils were black voids, endless, like they were looking right through me. They didn't blink. They just stared, unblinking, waiting, watching me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat. My body was frozen, paralyzed by terror. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as those eyes grew larger, filling the space with their intense, unblinking stare. I could feel them in my bones. It was watching me. The air around me grew thicker, heavier, like the walls were pushing in from all sides, my chest constricted, suffocating me with the weight of it. The whisper came again, louder this time. It was everywhere. It was in the walls, in my head, inside me. "I know you, Lisa. I know your every fear. I know what you've done, what you've hidden." It wasn't just a voice anymore. It was a presence, something dark, something alive, feeding on my fear, feeding on me. It knew everything. It knew my regrets, my failures. It knew the darkness I carried inside, and it was feeding off it. My mind felt like it was unraveling, like every thread of my sanity was being pulled apart piece by piece. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't take my eyes off the wall. The eyes were bigger now, growing out of the plaster like they were pushing their way through, stretching toward me, reaching for me. The crack spread wider, the plaster groaning under the pressure. I could hear something moving behind the wall, something crawling, dragging itself through the dark, coming for me. And then, the whisper became a command. Come closer. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I was trapped in my own head, trapped by the thing in the walls that knew me, knew everything about me, and was now pulling me into its darkness. I wanted to escape, but the walls closed in, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I screamed as loud as I could, but the sound was swallowed by the suffocating silence. The walls didn't let me go. And then, everything went dark. When I moved into this apartment, I thought I was running toward a fresh start. A new city, a new life, away from the wreckage I had left behind. I was desperate to find peace, to escape the noise in my head, the weight of guilt that never seemed to leave me. But nothing about this place felt like peace. It felt wrong from the start. At first, it was subtle. The kind of unease that comes with any new place. Shadows in the corners, unfamiliar creaks in the walls. I tried to ignore it. After all, old buildings make noise. But this wasn't just the usual creaking. It felt like the walls themselves were breathing, like they were alive, watching. And the crack in the wall by the bed, it didn't seem like something that could just happen in an old apartment. It felt purposeful. That night, I lay in bed, my mind spinning with thoughts I couldn't quiet. The darkness wrapped around me, thick and suffocating. I thought I could sleep, but my body wouldn't let me. Every sound in the apartment felt louder. Every creak, every sigh of the building felt like a warning. I pulled the covers up, trying to shield myself from the oppressive silence, but it didn't help. Then, I heard it. A whisper. At first, it was so faint that I thought I imagined it, but no, it was real. I could hear it. It came from inside the walls, low, eerie. I see you. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The whisper didn't stop. It came again, clearer this time, echoing in my mind. I'm waiting. I looked around the room, but everything was still. The walls, just old plaster, nothing special. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were closing in on me, like they were alive, waiting for something. Or someone. I don't know how long I lay there, too terrified to move. But the whisper kept coming, gnawing at my thoughts, pushing me to the edge of madness. The silence between the whispers felt unbearable. And that's when I saw it. The eyes. At first, they were barely noticeable. A flicker, a hint of something in the corner of my vision. I turned my head slowly, and there they were. Two glowing eyes peering out from the wall. They were there, in the crack, watching me. I couldn't look away. The eyes were glowing, faintly at first, like distant stars, but then they grew. They grew brighter and larger, filling the crack with a sickly yellow light. My breath hitched in my throat and I couldn't move. The eyes knew me. They were me. They were searching, looking deep into me, pulling at something inside. My pulse was hammering in my ears, my skin crawling with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. The eyes didn't blink. They just stared at me, unblinking, unfeeling, like they were absorbing everything, every thought, every secret I'd kept buried deep inside. They knew my guilt, they knew my fear, and they wanted it. The whisper came again. This time, it was louder. It felt like it was inside me, echoing in my skull. I know you, Lisa. I know everything about you. All your regrets, your fears. I recoiled, pressing my hands to my ears, trying to block out the voice, but it wouldn't stop. It was everywhere. It was in the walls, in the very air I breathed. It was inside me. I stumbled out of bed, my legs trembling beneath me. I had to get away. I had to get out of that room. But as I turned to run, the eyes followed me. They shifted within the wall, stretching, twisting, like they were reaching out for me. I turned back, my breath ragged, and saw that the crack was widening. The plaster groaned, as if the wall itself were trying to break free. The eyes grew larger, more intense. The light from them burned, searing into my vision, drawing me back to the wall. You can't escape. The voice was inside my head now, louder than ever. The walls were closing in, the air suffocating. I could feel them, it, pushing against my mind, pressing in, drawing me toward the crack, toward the eyes that had already begun to consume everything I was. My body moved on its own. I ran, my legs carrying me without thought, without control. I rushed toward the door, hands shaking as I grabbed the handle. I had to get out. I had to get away from the eyes, from whatever was crawling beneath the surface of the walls, from whatever was waiting for me. I didn't even think. I pulled the door open and stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. The light outside the room felt too bright, too real. I leaned against the door, my heart racing, my breath shallow. But the eyes, they were still there. I could feel them burning into me, following me even out here in the hallway. And then I heard it again. "I'm still here. I'm always here, Lisa." I shut the door behind me with a force that shook the walls. My body was shaking uncontrollably now, my breath ragged as I sank to the floor, clutching my knees to my chest. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I was trapped. The thing in the walls was alive. It was waiting. It was feeding on my fear. And I knew then that there was no escaping it. The eyes weren't just in the walls. They were in my mind, always watching, always waiting. And they would never let me go. I had no choice. I couldn't stay in that apartment any longer. The walls, they were alive. The air, thick with something foul, kept pressing against me, suffocating me with each passing second. The terror that had clawed at my chest since the first night had become unbearable. I needed help, desperately. But who could help me? Who would believe what I had seen? I had to go to Mrs. Roth. She was the only person I knew, the only neighbor who might understand. I could still hear her voice in my head from our first meeting, warm and welcoming, like she had seen the weight of the world and understood it. She had to know something. She had to have answers, or at the very least, a way to make the fear stop, to make the whispers stop. I stood outside her door for what felt like an eternity. My hands trembled as I knocked, my heart pounding in my chest. Was I really going to tell her everything? How could I? The eyes, the voices, the thing in the walls. It all sounded so crazy, so impossible. But I had no choice. I was falling apart, and if I didn't say it out loud, I was sure I'd lose my mind. The door creaked open slowly, and Mrs. Roth's face appeared. Her warm smile faltered when she saw me. I must have looked a mess. Pale, frantic, my eyes wide with fear. Her eyes softened, and she stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain the madness that had consumed me since I moved into that apartment. My legs felt weak as I entered, and the familiar silence of the hallway, the coldness of the building, made everything feel real again. Too real. I sank into a chair by the window, my hands shaking in my lap. Mrs. Roth sat across from me, waiting. I could feel the tension in the room, like she already knew what I was about to say, but she was letting me speak it out loud. The silence stretched on, pulling at my insides. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Finally, I forced them out. There's something in my apartment, something alive. Mrs. Roth's face went still. I saw the way her eyes flickered to the window, her hands tightening in her lap. She didn't speak immediately, she just sat there, studying me, like she was weighing whether I was truly ready to hear what she knew. Then, softly, she spoke. "I've seen it, Lisa. The thing in the walls. It's been here for years, long before either of us moved in." I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to process her words. The thing in the walls. It had been here before me. What was she talking about? This wasn't some normal building. It wasn't just old, it wasn't just falling apart, it was something else, something sinister, and it had been waiting for me. I forced the words out. "What is it? What is it doing to me? I keep hearing whispers, seeing eyes." Mrs. Roth looked down at her hands, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what it is, Lisa, but I know what it does. It feeds on fear, on guilt. It's not the building itself, but something older, something that has been here, buried in the walls for years. It feeds off of the broken ones, the ones who have something to hide, the ones who can't escape their past." My stomach lurched. I felt like I was falling, spiraling into a pit. Feeding on fear? It made sense. It was the only explanation for everything I'd been feeling, everything I'd seen. The whispers that called to me from the walls, the eyes that stared at me from within the plaster. It wasn't just my imagination, it was real, and it was waiting. Mrs. Roth's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something else in her expression. Something darker, something knowing. She reached for a book on the shelf behind her, pulling it down and handing it to me. It was old, leather-bound, its edges frayed with time. I could feel its weight in my hands, like it was pressing against my chest, like it was already a part of the truth I didn't want to face. "Look," she said softly, "this has been going on for decades. People have lived here before us. Some leave, and some disappear. The thing in the walls doesn't just torment you, it waits for the right moment. And when it gets you, it doesn't let go." I opened the book, scanning through pages of faded text and photographs. The images, old black and white photographs, showed buildings that looked like mine, cracks running along the walls, strange eyes glowing from behind the plaster. Each page spoke of a presence, an entity that fed on emotions, on fear and guilt. I turned the page quickly as though I could outrun the truth, but there it was, again and again. People who had lived here before me, all of them with one thing in common. They had all heard the whispers. They had all seen the eyes. And one by one, they had all vanished. Gone. I slammed the book shut, the sound echoing in the silence of the room. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as the fear that had been gnawing at me for days finally took hold. Mrs. Roth's voice was barely a whisper. "I've been here a long time, Lisa. I know what it does, but I've learned to live with it. I've learned to ignore it." She paused, her gaze lingering on me. "But you're not like me. You can't just ignore it. It's already inside you, whether you want to believe it or not." The words hit me like a blow. Inside me? No, that couldn't be true. I had seen the eyes, I had heard the whispers. But I wasn't broken, I wasn't that weak. But Mrs. Roth's eyes, the fear in them, told me a different story. I shook my head, backing away from the chair. I can't be like those people. I can't just let it take me. Mrs. Roth sighed, the weight of the years she had lived here pressing down on her shoulders. "You don't have a choice, dear. It's too late. The walls are already a part of you. It knows you, Lisa. It knows your fears, your guilt. And when it decides you're ready, it will take you." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I wanted to scream, to run, But something in Mrs. Roth's eyes told me that there was no running from this, no escaping it. The thing in the walls was already inside me, and I was trapped. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. "What do I do?" My voice cracked. She stood too, slowly, her face grave. "I don't know, but I can't help you. I've lived with it long enough to know when I'm too far gone. You'll have to face it yourself. You'll have to decide if you can survive what's coming." And then, in a soft voice, barely a whisper, she added, "Or if it will break you like it has so many before." I left her apartment without saying another word, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a suffocating fog. I knew now, there was no escape. The thing in the walls had already claimed me. I could feel it, even before I stepped into the apartment. The walls weren't just walls anymore, they were breathing. The air around me had grown dense, thick with something I couldn't name, but it made my skin crawl. Every step I took seemed too loud, each breath felt shallow. I could hear the creaks in the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, but none of it felt normal. Not anymore. The stillness in the apartment, the kind I thought I'd longed for, had taken on a new, sinister quality. It was suffocating. I had to do something, but I didn't know where to begin. Mrs. Roth's words still echoed in my mind. "It feeds on fear. It's too late. It's inside you now." Her voice had been calm, like she was delivering some kind of death sentence. I had thought I could ignore it. I had hoped, at the very least, that the creature in the walls wouldn't come after me. But I was wrong. The moment I stepped inside, it felt as if the apartment swallowed me whole. It had changed. It was no longer the same place I had moved into just a week ago. The walls were alive now, and I couldn't ignore them. I stood there for a moment, frozen, trying to steady my breathing, but the weight of it all was too much. The suffocating silence, the oppressive feeling in the air, something was wrong. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and the whispers began. They were faint at first, like a distant voice, a soft murmur from the corners of the room. But they grew louder with each passing second, insistent, like they were circling me, closing in. "I see you." My blood ran cold. I whipped around, my eyes scanning the apartment, but the room was empty. No one was there. Yet the voice was. It was coming from the walls. It was inside the walls. It was inside me. I stepped forward, my feet almost unwilling to move. The crack in the wall, where I had first seen the eyes, was larger now. It wasn't just a small fissure anymore. The crack had spread, twisting its way down the wall, expanding as though something behind it was pushing, straining to get out. The faintest glow bled from the edges of the crack, like something hidden beneath the surface was reaching for me. The whispers grew more intense, more insistent. "I've been waiting for you." The voice was darker now, and it seemed to come from all directions at once, filling the air around me. The glow from the crack in the wall pulsed, its rhythm matching the beat of my heart. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The room spun around me, the weight of the creature's presence crushing me from all sides. It was waiting for me. It was feeding on me, on the terror that was taking root in my mind. The air thickened, choking me, and I realized I wasn't just hearing the whispers. I could feel them. They were crawling under my skin, wrapping around my insides, twisting and knotting in my chest. "You can't escape me, Lisa." The walls creaked, groaned, like the building itself was alive, flexing and moving to make room for whatever was inside it. Whatever was behind the walls. Whatever had been waiting for me from the moment I had stepped through that door. My heart pounded in my ears, and my chest tightened, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, drawn toward the crack in the wall, drawn toward the glowing eyes that were there, waiting, just beyond the surface. The creature's presence felt like it was pressing against me, wrapping itself around my soul, suffocating me. Then, without warning, I heard it. A faint scratching. Soft at first, almost imperceptible. But then it grew louder, dragging against the plaster like nails on a chalkboard. It was real. I wasn't imagining it. Something was in the walls, scraping, clawing its way through the barrier. I backed away, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my pulse racing in my throat. But no matter how much I wanted to run, I couldn't. My feet wouldn't move. It was as if the walls themselves were holding me in place, forcing me to watch, to listen. The scraping grew louder, closer. It was right there, just behind the crack. I could feel it, hear it, as though it were coming from inside me. It was inside my mind now, scratching at the deepest corners of my thoughts. "I know you, Lisa." The voice was louder now, clearer. "I know your fear, your guilt, your regrets." I gasped, my hands flying to my head, but there was no escaping it. The creature, it knew everything. It knew my darkest secrets, the things I had buried deep inside. It knew the guilt I carried, the mistakes I couldn't undo. It fed on them. It was feeding on me. The glow from the wall pulsed again, brighter now, almost blinding. I could see the edges of the crack stretching wider, like something was pushing against the plaster, pushing to break free. The scratching turned into pounding, frantic and violent. The wall trembled beneath my fingertips, the very fabric of the apartment shuddering under the strain. And then, in the dark, behind the crack, it emerged. At first, it was just a shadow, a shifting, formless mass that seemed to crawl through the plaster, wriggling toward the surface. But then the eyes, those eyes, appeared. Huge, glowing yellow eyes, black pits of nothingness, staring straight through me. They weren't just in the wall, they were inside the wall, inside me, watching, waiting. I stumbled backward, my chest tight, my mind screaming, "No, no, no," but I couldn't escape. There was no escape. The eyes grew, spreading across the wall, filling the crack, expanding like a living thing. I could hear its voice, low and menacing, wrapping around my mind. "You cannot escape me. You belong to me now." My vision blurred as the creature's influence overwhelmed me, its presence suffocating, consuming every inch of me. The walls closed in, and I could hear the scratching, the breathing, the whispers. They were no longer separate. They were one. The creature had already claimed me. There was no running, no way out. I was trapped. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that I'm okay, that I'm safe. The moment I stepped back into my apartment, I could feel the change. The air was different, thicker, colder. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore, it was suffocating. It was like the walls were closing in, like they were alive, breathing with me, watching me. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that I'd been through so much recently that my mind was just playing tricks on me. But the longer I stayed in that apartment, the more I realized I wasn't imagining it. Something was in the walls, something that had been waiting for me. The whispers began again. Soft at first, a low murmur that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. "I see you." My heart stopped. I froze in place, breathless. I turned toward the wall, the crack that had haunted me for days. It was bigger now, wider. The plaster was pulling apart, as though something was pushing from behind, something with weight, with hunger. I took a step back, but it was no use. The walls, they were alive. I could feel them, pressing in on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. The light in the room flickered, and in the dimness, I saw it. The faintest glow, like the reflection of eyes. Two glowing yellow eyes blinking at me from within the wall. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My pulse pounded in my ears, deafening, as the eyes grew larger, stretching, filling the crack. It was waiting for me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the eyes, feeling them sink into me, pulling at my very soul. And then the whispers came again, louder now, like the creature behind the wall was speaking directly into my mind. I know you, Lisa. I know everything about you, your fear, your guilt, your regrets. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape it. The walls were closing in, and the eyes, those glowing eyes, were following me, stalking me from within the plaster, from within my own mind. The scraping sound started again, sharp, frantic. I felt it deep in my bones, like nails dragging across the inside of my skull. It was coming from the walls. No, from inside me. The creature was already there, burrowing deeper into my thoughts, into the darkest parts of me. Come closer, Lisa. The voice was now a command, not a whisper, a demand. I've been waiting for you. The walls groaned, the plaster bending and stretching, as if it was alive, as if the building itself was being torn apart from the inside. And that's when I realized the creature wasn't just in the walls, it was in me. It had already claimed me. I turned toward the door, my hand reaching for the handle, but it wouldn't open. The door was locked. The apartment was locked. I was trapped. It had trapped me. I could feel it behind me, in the walls, in the air, in my mind. Its influence was everywhere, wrapping around me, squeezing me. I pressed my hands against my head, trying to block it out, but the voice was too loud now. It was inside me, crawling through my thoughts, drowning out everything else. You can't escape, Lisa. You never could. I spun around, desperate to get out, but the walls were closing in, the room shrinking around me, the eyes watching, waiting for me to break. The glow from the crack grew brighter, and I saw it. The creature, or at least what it was becoming. It wasn't just eyes anymore. It was a shadow, an inky blackness that bled out from the crack in the wall, creeping toward me like something alive, something hungry. I backed away, my body trembling, but the creature followed. The walls shifted, groaning, bending as though they were alive, as though they were breathing with the creature, with it. The air was thick, suffocating, and I could feel the creature's presence pressing down on me. It was too much. The fear, the guilt, the realization that there was no escape, it all came crashing down on me. I stumbled, my back hitting the wall, and that's when I saw it, the eyes. They were no longer just in the crack. They were all around me, in the corners of the room, behind the furniture, in the shadows, watching. I was trapped. I had always been trapped. The creature had always been there, waiting for me to let it in, and now it had. I heard the voice again, but it wasn't in my head this time. It was in the room with me, all around me, like the very walls themselves were whispering. You belong to me now, Lisa. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body wouldn't obey. The creature had me. It had always had me. And the worst part? I knew I was never going to escape. Not physically, not mentally. It was already inside me, and it wasn't going to let me go. I had always thought I knew fear. It's something we all live with, right? Something that you can push aside, shove into a corner, lock away. I had convinced myself I could handle it. But now, as I stand here in this apartment, in this place that should have been my escape, I realize how wrong I was. The walls, they're not just walls anymore. They've become something else, something that breathes with me, watches me, feeds on me. The air in here is thick, suffocating. It wraps around my chest, tightening with every breath. I can feel it in the walls, in the cracks, in the shadows. They're all closing in on me. I never believed in things like this, not really. I thought ghosts and creatures from nightmares were stories, things for people to tell around campfires. But this is different. The whispering started slow, like a voice from far away, something I could ignore. But then it grew louder, more insistent, until I couldn't escape it. The walls are alive, they're watching me. I've tried to ignore it. I've tried to pretend it's all in my head, that it's just my stress, my mind playing tricks on me. But I know now, I feel it, that something is waiting for me in the dark. Something that has been here for far longer than I've been alive. The cracks in the walls, they weren't there before. Or maybe they were, but they've gotten bigger, deeper, like something is pushing against them from the inside. The first night I saw the eyes, those glowing yellow eyes watching me from the cracks, I thought I was losing my mind. I tried to convince myself it was just the darkness playing tricks on me, that I was just too tired. But they were real, and they were watching me. And now, they're everywhere. The air in this apartment is suffocating, thick with something dark. I can hear the walls shift, creak, as if they're stretching, groaning under the weight of whatever is inside them. It's not just the old building settling, it's something else, something hungry. I can feel it now, creeping up my spine, its cold breath on the back of my neck. The whispers, they're getting louder. I see you, Lisa. It's in my head, I can't escape it, I can't escape it. The thing that's inside the walls, the thing that's inside me now. It knows me. It knows every secret I've kept, every mistake I've made, every fear I've buried deep inside. It knows all the parts of me that I don't want to face. And it's feeding on that fear. It's feeding on me. I tried to leave. I tried to run, but the door won't open. It's locked, and I didn't lock it. I didn't lock it, but it's locked. I'm trapped. The walls are closing in, and I can feel the thing in them pushing, pulling, waiting. It's getting closer. I can hear the scratching again, louder this time. It's inside the walls. Scraping, clawing, moving closer to the surface. It's like 1,000 tiny fingers running across the plaster. No, it's more than that. It's alive. It's real. Come closer, Lisa. I've been waiting for you. The voice? It's in my mind, in my blood, crawling through my veins. It's feeding on me, on my fear, on my guilt. I can feel it now, wrapping around my insides, twisting my thoughts, pulling at the darkest corners of my mind. It's inescapable. I step forward, drawn to the crack in the wall. I can't stop myself. My hand reaches out, trembling, toward the glowing eyes, toward the thing that's waiting for me. The closer I get, the heavier the air becomes, suffocating, pressing down on my chest. The wall is alive. I can feel it. Something is pushing from behind it. Something that doesn't belong. I can't move. I can't stop myself. I'm drawn to it, closer and closer, until my fingers graze the surface of the wall. And that's when I feel it. Cold, sharp, like 1,000 tiny knives pricking at my skin. The wall is breathing, pulsing, alive with the thing behind it. The eyes, they're bigger now, they're everywhere. And then, the worst part. The real truth hits me like a fist to the gut. It's not just in the walls, it's not just a creature feeding on my fear, it's inside me. The realization tears through me like a flood, and for the first time, I understand what this thing really is. It's not some outside force, some dark entity that's waiting to crawl out of the walls and consume me. No, this thing has been with me all along. It's been in my mind, in my thoughts, feeding off my guilt, my regret, my fear. It has been waiting for me to break, waiting for me to realize that I've always been trapped, inside my own mind. The walls are just a reflection of what's inside me. The creature isn't in the apartment. It's in my soul, in my thoughts. And now, as the walls close in around me, I know the truth. There is no escape. I was never going to get out of here. The creature has already won. It has consumed me completely. I'm not just trapped in this apartment, I'm trapped inside my own mind, and there's no way out. Thank you for venturing into the shadows with me here at Frightful Whispers. Remember, the darkness holds secrets, but also whispers truths to those who dare to listen. If tonight's tale sent shivers down your spine, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep the fire of fright alive. Rest easy, but keep one eye open, for the night is never truly still. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay curious, and let the whispers guide you.